Baseball is back. Opening day is here. The World Baseball Classic and spring training have come and gone. And I want to talk about all of that in today's baseball-focused episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. Without further ado, let's get into it. As I do with every episode, I first want to thank each and every one of you for watching this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. Whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on an audio platform, I really appreciate the support. If you are watching on YouTube, click the like button down below. It really helps out the channel. It puts into the algorithm that you're liking our videos, and it'll suggest the videos to new sports fans who are on YouTube to enjoy our content and build our community here. And as well, subscribe if you're not already. I really appreciate it. We're nearing 100 subscribers, so that's really awesome. I'm very happy about that. Recently had a merch giveaway on the channel, so the winner knows they're there. I'm not going to share any details of who they are, obviously, but thank you for the support. There are hidden merch giveaways in videos on this channel, so if you're interested, go back and watch some videos. I sneak them in at the end. So, there's some hidden on the videos on this channel, just so you know. Free merch. Ships to US, Canada, Japan, Germany, a few other countries, but not all countries. And I should preface that now. If you are listening on an audio platform, rate us 5 stars wherever you're at, whether it's Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I really appreciate all the support over there. And overall, just in general, I appreciate the support everywhere on the socials, at Lots of Thoughts Sports on Instagram and TikTok, at LOT Sports Pod on Twitter, at Lots of Thoughts Sports on YouTube. I really appreciate the support. Links for all of this is in the description on YouTube or in the show notes in the audio platforms as well. You can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. There you can access the podcast, the newsletter, the socials, the merchandise, everything all on that website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com, also in the description. Housekeeping out of the way. Baseball is back, man. I am a baseball fan. I'm a sports fan. I'm a sports fan through and through, right? I've got 3 sports that I really love. Not the Yankees. I mean, I do love the Yankees, but that's not the sport. Baseball, football, basketball, those are my 3. And as it is, it depends on how good my teams are, which sport I prioritize over football and basketball, right? So the Nets with Kevin Durant and their surge over the past few years, I was obviously more interested in them rather than watching Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson, Mike White and Joe Flacco and whoever else was floundering at quarterback for the New York Jets. And now the Jets are supposed to get Aaron Rodgers whenever that'll happen. I'm not going to talk about that on today's episode. And the Nets have traded away Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, so the Jets have become a little more interesting to me, and football has therefore become a little bit more interesting. But number one in my heart is always baseball, and maybe that's because the Yankees are always contending or at least vying for a playoff spot. But I love baseball. I love the start of the season. I love opening day. It feels like a holiday. It should be a holiday, but that's neither here nor there. Everyone is at a fresh start. Everyone's ready to go. Everyone's excited. Everyone thinks they have a chance to win the World Series, even if they don't, right? Even the Nationals are excited to see CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. Even the Oakland A's are excited to see, Tony Kemp and Aledmys Diaz and Seth Brown and other guys that they've signed in the offseason. Fujinami is a good one that I'm interested to see in Oakland, see how he does. For the A's in a relief role coming from Japan. But nonetheless, baseball season is just exciting in general, right? The top teams are going to be the top teams, right? The big spenders are always going to be in it. The Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, right? But I love that baseball has teams that put together new ways to win, right? You see a team like the Cleveland Guardians who don't have a high payroll, and I'm not advocating for a low payroll whatsoever. I'll rip into an owner, and we might get into that in this episode, to be honest, for not having a high enough payroll. And Cleveland is certainly one of those teams, but at the end of the day, they still play a fun brand of baseball. A lot of speed, a lot of contact, a lot of really quality pitching, right? Pitching against contact and hitting for contact. And I think that's something that's not found a lot in today's game. But, I like the innovation with baseball teams. I like the science and the math behind analytics. But I also like the old school feel that comes in a lot of times, especially with managers that have been around a while, like Buck Showalter, like Rob Thompson, even though he hasn't been a manager for that long. But you get my drift, like Bob Melvin in San Diego. Baseball season is exciting. And this year, throughout spring training, most of spring training, we had the World Baseball Classic going on. And if you missed it, I am so disappointed for you because it was an absolute awesome show. And if you're not familiar, basically it's a competition every 3 years. Very similar to the World Cup of soccer, right? Where teams send out or countries send out teams to compete. I believe there's 20 teams that made it into the World Cup qualifiers this year, the pool play, should I say, from all over the world, right? Far into Asia as China and Japan. Uh, Obviously, you have countries in North America, Mexico, the United States, Canada, countries all the way down to South America. Venezuela was in it. Colombia was in it. And then you have some European countries. Italy fielded a team. Great Britain fielded a team with awful uniforms, but nonetheless, Israel fielded a team. That's not Europe, but that's besides the point. I love the world competition of it. I love the fire these players come in with because it's not the same. And there's been a lot of debate whether the World Baseball Classic is more important to a player or should be more important to a player than the World Series or vice versa. And at the end of the day, the World Series is the ultimate competition in the MLB, which is the highest level of competition, the highest league of competition out there, right? And as an American, I could say I'd rather win the World Series if I was a baseball player, but a lot of these players grew up outside of America, right? Players from the Dominican Republic, players from Japan, players from Australia, players from, all over Latin America, all over Asia, all over Europe, all over parts of Africa too, all over North America, all over, every place of the world you could think of where maybe the World Series wasn't the pinnacle. Maybe it was representing your country. And obviously, the World Baseball Classic hasn't been around for a long time, but it's been around for most, if not all of these players' lives, 25, 30 years or so. So obviously, it's going to mean a lot to them. And the pinnacle of competition might be representing their country. And I don't fault them for that. The energy was absolutely crazy. You had games between the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico was one that was just crazy energy. Japan and the US in the final, boy, I'll talk about that in a moment. I love the energy all around and the star-studded lineups, man. Dominican Republic at some point wanted to bat Rafael Devers sixth. Like, that's insane to me. That's just insane. And this is the first year that I think that competition level really stepped up. I think in years past it lacked. And in some ways it still did this year, but I think it really stepped up. They didn't have a World Baseball Classic 3 years ago in 2020. They had it last in 2017. But this one this year, post-pandemic, it was a really great sight to see. Now, I do want to say, I wish more American pitchers went, right? The American rotation, I have the roster up right now. The American rotation consisted of Adam Wainwright from the Cardinals, who's a decent pitcher, but he's 40. Nick Martinez from the Padres, who's kind of a swing man, turned starter, reliever turned starter last year. Brady Singer from the Royals, who's decent. Kyle Freeland from the Rockies, who's pretty good. Lance Lynn from the White Sox, who's good, although has had a recent dip in his strikeout and ERA totals. Merrill Kelly from the Diamondbacks, a decent starter, and Miles McCollum from the St. Louis Cardinals as well. A lot of Cardinals representatives. You would have liked more representation in the rotation from the upper echelon of American starters, right? When you have a team like the Dominican Republic able to throw out multiple Cy Young winners, it's really disappointing that the best pitcher we're throwing out is either Lance Lynn or Adam Wainwright. I don't know. They're all about even in my mind. There were some good relief pitchers. The lineup was great. This is just a projection for the starting lineup. It shuffled around quite a bit, but you had JT Realmuto from the Phillies catching, Paul Goldschmidt playing first, and Nolan Arenado playing third. So two more Cardinals representatives. Trey Turner playing short, of course, recent signee of the Phillies. Tim Anderson bumped to second. A lot of the top second basemen are from other countries, right? You think of Jose Altuve being from Venezuela. You think of Andres Jimenez, what I believe he's from Puerto Rico. And then in the outfield, you had Kyle Tucker, Mike Trout, and Mookie Betts. You also had Cedric Mullins rotate in there. And then they have the DH as Pete Alonso. That also rotated around. Kyle Schwarber got some run there. Who else? Jeff McNeil played some minutes. Will Smith also got some catching minutes. There was a lot of limitations on when pitchers could pitch, when players could play, because teams obviously want to protect their players. And so for, concern of injury, Pitchers were not allowed to pitch 2 days in a row. Some players were limited to certain positions. For example, the Red Sox didn't want Rafael Devers playing first. There were some restrictions on things like that, but the pitching representation I would have liked more from the US. You could imagine a lineup, right? Of Jacob deGrom, Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Corbin Burns. I don't know who you're throwing out there, but that's six right there, six Americans who are bona fide top 10 starting pitchers. And when other teams are throwing out Sandy Alcantara and Shohei Ohtani, you got a starting rotation that can go with the best of them. And maybe that was the difference in the final, but nonetheless, an awesome competition that the U.S. and other countries put out there. I do want to say that I hate the narratives. I know I'm bouncing all over a little bit, but the World Baseball Classic was met with a lot of criticism, in large part, like I mentioned, from people saying that you should want the World Series to be prioritized more, which I think is not the case for a lot of people, and I can't blame them either way. But I think the second most concerning part was injuries. This was played during spring training, as I mentioned, and this is a high level of competition. So there's going to be players that get injured, just like there's players that get injured in spring training, right? You had guys like Gavin Lux, guys like Brandon Nimmo get hurt in spring training, just the same. Carlos Rodon, for example. And then you had guys in the World Baseball Classic like Edwin Diaz and Jose Altuve and Freddie Freeman that also got hurt, but instead did in the World Baseball Classic. And there's a level of which I understand people complaining, saying, the team that pays you should be your first priority. But at the end of the day, that's a bunch of malarkey, in my opinion. You can't sit here and tell me in the 21st century that your job is your number one priority in every single person's life. This is the age of people in younger generations realizing that work is a way to make money, not a way to live your life. And so you see just the same players are pursuing a passion of playing for their country, representing their country, and doing so with a fire and with a passion that you don't see unless you really go far in the playoffs. And so players get hurt, right? Edwin Diaz, closer for the Mets, was also closing for Puerto Rico. They win against the DR, go to the advance past the pool stage and go to get into the bracket, right? Best of 8 or 16, I can't remember. Best of 8, had to be best of 8. And they're jumping around and celebrating, and he messed up his knee. I believe he might have tore his meniscus, or it was a patellar tendon. I can't remember. Now he's out for the year. And that sucks because the Mets just paid him a whole lot of money, $100+ million, to be their closer. He's one of the best relievers in baseball, and he got hurt celebrating. But who's to say he wouldn't have gotten hurt in another scenario, right? If his knee is already having these issues, who's to say he didn't pick up his kids and jump around and get hurt? Or he was jumping off the mound in spring training and got hurt, right? Injuries are going to happen. And I don't think you can criticize the event because injuries happened at it. Injuries didn't happen because of it, in my opinion. And so I don't love that narrative. I don't love the blaming of the players for going to the World Baseball Classic and prioritizing that. I think that's a bunch of malarkey. If a player went, I don't criticize them whatsoever. I don't question whether they truly love their team in the MLB, whether they're truly wanting to get a World Series championship for their team in Major League Baseball, because at the end of the day, everyone has alternative priorities that sometimes take over, and you can't blame them for that, right? If you miss a day of work because your child is sick, of course, no one's going to care. If you miss a day of work because you go to vote, that's completely legal. So in the same way, if you miss part of spring training, which doesn't matter whatsoever, right? This is not in the middle of the season. This is normal games they would have been playing anyway down in Florida or Arizona, and you go to the World Baseball Classic, then I think that's perfectly fine, if at least if I owned a team. But a lot of these owners don't think the same way, and they don't want their players to go. I do like that the MLB is the one pushing this, because if owners were allowed to say and contradict the MLB, allowed to say that players couldn't go, we wouldn't get a representation like we did. And I think in 3 years, now that other players see how fun this is, how exciting this is, we'll see a higher representation in 3 years. Nonetheless, the final, if you didn't watch it, storybook ending. So it's Japan versus the United States, right? I mentioned Mike Trout's playing for the Angels. He's the captain of the team, of the Team US, that is. And he was carrying the U.S. flag on the field. On the other side, Team Japan, Mike Trout's teammate in LA, Shohei Ohtani, the captain of the Japanese team, carrying the Japan flag onto the field as the teams took the field for warmups. Awesome moment, right? They go through the game, and Ohtani is going to come in relief. He didn't start the game. And Japan pulled a nice tactic I thought was very cool, that they didn't start Yu Darvish. They didn't pitch a lot of their pitchers that had MLB experience because a lot of these American players had seen them, right? I mean, how many times has Yu Darvish pitched against guys like Nolan Arenado, right? Yu Darvish pitched for the Cubs, for the Dodgers, for the Rangers, for the Rangers especially, a guy like Mike Trout playing for the Angels, right? They see the Rangers 19 times a year. So Mike Trout's probably got dozens of at-bats versus Yu Darvish. They've probably seen him, half a dozen games. So Japan threw out pitchers that played in the Japanese professional leagues, and NPBL, I think it is, Nippon Professional Baseball League. So that way the MLB players hadn't seen them before, and I thought that was a great strategy. But they did bring in Darvish in relief, and they did bring in Ohtani to close the game, and it was a perfect moment. Kyle Schwarber tied up the game against Yu Darvish, and in the ninth inning, they bring in Ohtani. America was down 3-2, and Jeff McNeil pinch hits, comes up, gets on base. Mookie Betts grounds into a double play. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth. Or maybe it was the top of the ninth. It doesn't really matter anyway. No one on. Mike Trout up. Shohei Ohtani pitching to Mike Trout. And what makes this unique, right? Obviously, they're Angels teammates. But I think what's lost on this is the 2 greatest players in baseball right now. And in my opinion, they're 2 of the greatest players in the history of baseball. 2 of the top, if you want to say 10 to 15 at the very most, players in the history of baseball, right? I think Mike Trout's one of the best bats we've ever seen. And then combine that with his elite defense, combine that with his elite base running, elite arm, contact power all the way through. I think Mike Trout was the greatest players in baseball until Ohtani came into the league. And Ohtani is like having Garrett Cole on the pitcher side and Rafael Devers on the hitting side, right? He is an elite hitter and an elite pitcher. And so you have these 2 guys matched up, these 2 teammates who never faced each other because Ohtani's been with the Angels his whole career. And maybe that changes this offseason, but I'm not going to talk about this in this episode. And you had these 2 guys face one another like never before. But more importantly, not only are these 2 guys the best players in the league, these 2 guys are 2 stars that have never made the playoffs in the MLB. Because the Angels suck every year, whether it's injuries, whether it's a lack of pitching, a lack of hitting, it's always something. And so these are 2 guys that have never been on the big stage, that have never been in the playoff spotlight or in the World Series. And here they are in a competition that could be bigger than the World Series, facing off mano a mano against each other, 1v1, never seen each other before outside of practice and, the kind of splits or inter squad spring training game, going against each other for the rights to win the World Baseball Classic and win a proverbial gold medal. I don't think they really get a gold medal, but nonetheless win a championship for their home country. And Shohei Ohtani got Mike Trout swinging 3 times. I believe he threw 4 pitches overall, but 3 strikes swinging. And to show you out of Mike Trout's whole MLB career, thousands of at-bats, he's only swung and missed in 24 at-bats in his career. So this is something incredibly rare. Shohei Ohtani throwing 102 miles an hour, throwing a 97 mile an hour splitter. Just insane numbers from Ohtani against Trout. And they close out the World Baseball Classic. Electric atmosphere. If you haven't seen the video, I posted it on all the socials, lots of thoughts, sports on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can see the short reel, TikTok, whatever you want to call it, where they, show the final pitch from Ohtani and all the angles of him celebrating with the Team Japan. It's electric. It's an awesome moment. I highly recommend watching that video. And when the next World Baseball Classic comes around, I highly recommend watching. Start from the beginning. See who's on each team, because if you're a fan of an MLB team, chances are you got players there, right? I'm going to use the Red Sox, for example, just because they were on the top of my head with Devers. But for example, Devers played for the Dominican Republic. Xander Bogaerts played for Netherlands. Trevor Story would have played for the U.S. had he not gotten hurt. Alex Verdugo played for Mexico, right? They had players all the way through. Christian Vasquez, I forgot what team he played for, Puerto Rico, maybe. They had players all the way through their roster, although Vasquez is not a Red Sox anymore, but that's not the point. Players all the way through their current and former roster that are playing for new teams. So even if you're not a fan of any particular country, it's still fun to watch these guys team up with people you've never seen them play with before, right? You've never seen Gleyber Torres of the Yankees celebrate with Jose Altuve of the Astros, right? They hate each other. Those two teams hate each other, but they're teaming up for Team Venezuela and they're celebrating when they get a win. So it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend watching when it comes around in 2026. It'll be fun to watch. I hope bigger stars play, and those that were hesitant to do so get out there and represent their country because it's something to watch. And now on to MLB opening day. Man, opening day is so awesome. I'd love to break down every team, in a podcast form, but as sad as it is, I don't have a lot of time for that. And my voice would die out very quickly. I don't know if you know this. I record about a half an hour episodes because by the end of these, I'm like choking. No matter how much soda or water I drink, I got a Diet Pepsi here for those of you watching on YouTube. Hope you got some ASMR vibes from that. But nonetheless, opening day is an exciting time. And so it's a lot of time for prediction. And even though a lot of games have been played, it's about, it's actually not opening day anymore. It's just past midnight here on the East Coast on now March 31st. I'm still going to make a prediction for what I think happens in, up and throughout the season. I'm not going to make individual predictions about trades or anything like that, but who I think is going to come out on top. I think at the end of the day, the landscape has not changed all too much. Teams have not drastically improved, right? Houston added Jose Abreu, for example. The Yankees added Carlos Rodon. The Braves are getting back a healthy Ronald Acuna and hopefully firing Ronald Acuna and Ozzy Albies. The Mariners are going to have a full season of Luis Castillo. The Blue Jays made major moves in their outfield, although I don't think they leveled up necessarily. The Mets added Justin Verlander in place of Jacob deGrom. The Padres made moves throughout the offseason. Alexander Bogaerts, that was a big addition. The Phillies added Trey Turner to their already talented lineup. But at the end of the day, I don't think those moves ever are able to put a team over the top right away unless they were already the prohibitive favorite. And I don't think the Astros are obviously the favorite, and I'm going to pick them to be the first seed in the AL. Spoiler alert. But I still don't think that it puts them over that level. So nonetheless, it's going to be a similar field. I have Houston winning their division. Obviously, I think that's pretty common consensus. I like the Mariners a lot, but not that much. And I don't think the Rangers have enough firepower on offense. The A's would be lucky to get to 80 wins this year. I think that would be a golden season. And the Angels obviously can never put it together. Maybe they make a playoff spot, but I don't see it in the cards this year, and definitely don't see them winning the division. So I have the Astros first overall seed in the AL and winning their division. So that'll give them a first round bye. Listen, the Astros were already a very talented team. They keep getting hit with players leaving, whether it's Garrett Cole, whether it's George Springer, whether it's Carlos Correa, and they still keep churning out new talent. They're just a machine through and through. Justin Verlander's gone, who cares? Zach Greinke's gone, who cares? Dallas Keuchel's gone, who cares? They just keep churning through this talent. It's incredible to watch. And so I believe they're still going to do it. Guys like who's their pitcher coming up that's pitches incredibly like Verlander. If you haven't seen his mechanics, I'm gonna have to Google it because I don't remember. But whether it's with prospects that they're calling up or guys that they signed, I mean, Jose Abreu is going to be a big guy for them. Their starting rotation right now is projected to be Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Lance McCullers, Luis Garcia, and Jose Urquidy. But guys like Michael Brantley coming back, Yordan Alvarez is a crazy, crazy, crazy player, man. He is awesome to watch. I can't find the name of the starter off the top of my head, but I think Yordan Alvarez might be the best bat in Major League Baseball. That's how good he is, right? He rivals whoever you want to say is up there, Aaron Judge, Mike Trout. He's just incredible to watch. So, obviously his defense isn't there necessarily in his base running, and that's why he's not that elite. I mean, he's a top 10 player in baseball, but he's not the best player in baseball for that reason. But nonetheless, an incredible team to watch. I think they're gonna catch a lot of eyes, and I have them taking the first seed. Second seed, I'm also gonna keep the same in the AL, and winning their division, I have the New York Yankees. I think the addition of Carlos Rodon when he's going to be healthy is going to be great. Their rotation is elite and it has a lot of depth, right? Frankie Montas goes down. That's okay. They got guys like Clark Schmidt and Domingo Herman that can step in. So when that rotation and whoever that rotation ends up being past Cole, Rodon, Severino, Nestor Cortez, whether it's Clark Schmidt or Domingo Herman or Montas comes back, I think that's an elite rotation, and the lineup's just improving. They called up their young prospect, Anthony Volpe, who I think is going to make an impact at short. So I have them as their second seed, and I have them winning that division. Not handedly, because I think there are good teams in that division, but nonetheless, I have them making the second seed. Third seed, so the last division winner, I have Cleveland repeating as division winners. I think the Twins could rival them just because this division is bad. I think only one team makes it into the playoffs. I don't believe in the White Sox. I don't believe in the Royals. And who is the last team? Oh, Detroit. Detroit has some pieces I like, but they're still years away. So I have the Cleveland, like I mentioned, they're a fun brand of baseball. A lot of speed, a lot of contact, a lot of elite pitching development. And so, I think even though they don't have a high payroll, they have some great talent. They're locking up that great talent. Andres Jimenez just got signed to an extension. Jose Ramirez got signed, just last year or the year before, to a long-term extension. I like that for their future. Those two cornerstone pieces at second and third base, respectively. So I have them at the third seed. And I guess in the first round, they'd be facing off against the sixth seed, who I'll talk about in just a second. The fourth seed, I have the same. There's going to be a lot of repetition here. I have the Toronto Blue Jays taking the fourth seed. I think they made major upgrades. I like Dalton Varsho. I like that George Springer doesn't need to play center field anymore. I think that'll keep him a little bit healthier. Losing guys like Lourdes Gurriel and Teoscar Hernandez is going to hurt, but when you replace him with guys like Varsho and Kiermaier's all right. I think Kiermaier's also obviously going to play a lot of center. So I think it's a valuable upgrade. Maybe it's not necessarily a hitting upgrade, but they already had a very talented lineup, and their lineup was very right-handed. So adding a lefty bat like Kiermaier, adding a guy like Varsho that's a very versatile, can play multiple positions, I think works really well for them. And then they have elite production from their infield, whether it's Guerrero at first, Chapman at third, Bichette at short, whoever's playing second. It doesn't matter whether it's Espinal, whether it's the guy they just traded for from the Kansas City Royals, and I can't think of his name right now. But like I mentioned, Biggio could go in, Santiago Espinal could sub in, Brandon Belt's going to get a lot of run at first base and DH. Whit Merrifield is the guy I was thinking starting at second. Their lineup has a lot of depth that it didn't have last year, and they have a good rotation, right? Kevin Gausman and Alek Manoah at the top of that. Chris Bassett, a new signing from the Mets, going to be pitching third in their third slot. And then you got guys like Jose Barrios, guys like Yusei Kikuchi, Hyunjin Ryu, if he gets back. I think they have a lot of talent in the pitching department, and they'll be able to put it together and stay in playoff contention. I don't think they win the division, but I think they're the best of the wild card teams. Number 5, I have the Seattle Mariners. Just the same, right? This bracket's laying out just the same, and it's not going to work out that way. But that's the way it was last year. That's the way it is this year, in my opinion. I think Luis Castillo is a big upgrade for them. I think Teoscar Hernandez is a big pickup. I talked about how that hurts Toronto to lose him, but I think that's an upgrade entirely at the outfield position. It really improves their overall lineup depth, lengthens their lineup incredibly. I love that upgrade. Robbie Ray, I think, could have a resurgent season in him. They have other good young talent that's really going to improve. Obviously, Julio Rodriguez is a talent. I think Jared Kelenic could be a value play for, if MLB had like a most improved player like the NBA does. I think he would be a good bet on that, just because the odds would be low rather. And I think he's got the tools to improve, and he couldn't be worse than he was last year. So I think Seattle's got a lot of depth to them. Good bullpen, good rotation. So I have them at the 5th slot here. And then in the 6th slot, I went back and forth, right? I think Tampa's a good team, and if their pitching can stay healthy, right? McClanahan, Glass now, he's had a lot of issues, various prospects that I'd love to see come up. I think they could be a contender. The Orioles, I think, could make noise here. and try to grab that playoff spot. Same with the Red Sox. I think the Red Sox have an underrated amount of talent. As I mentioned in the West, the Angels, I think, could make a playoff spot. The Rangers could make a playoff spot. The A's, and the Central at the end of the day, I think it's going to be tough for Cleveland and Minnesota to both make it. But that's what I have. Plot twist. Got you there. I have Minnesota making it in the 6th spot. They'll face off against Cleveland in the first round. Listen, they brought back Carlos Correa. They traded away Luis Ariz, which I think hurts. But they got a guy like Pablo Lopez who can really anchor that rotation. Sonny Gray's there, who I think is one of the more underrated pitchers in baseball nowadays. They have overall incredible. How do I say this? They're good at getting the most out of their players. And if Byron Buxton can stay healthy, he's an MVP candidate. He's a top 10 player in baseball. And so if he does, I think that they could put a really competitive product out there on the field. I said I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Angels. Wouldn't be surprised if it's the Rays. That's probably the favorites pick for the last playoff team here. Wouldn't be surprised if it's the Orioles. If Adley Rutschman carries them to the promised land. He's incredible, man. 5 hits today in opening day, including a home run. Never been done by a catcher in Major League history. But nonetheless, I have Minnesota taking this spot and their offense coming through. Correa leading a resurgent bunch back to the playoffs. And so in the NL, I'll go through the teams. First off, first seed, I have the Braves. I think they're the best team in the National League, and I think they're a top 3 team in baseball. Just an incredible lineup that I think is going to get a boost. They're going to call up a prospect to replace Dansby Swanson, and that loss hurts. But you got guys that I think could make an improvement. I think Austin Riley could continue to get better. Obviously, Ronald Acuna Jr. wasn't fully back last year. I think he's going to be. Ozzie Albies is going to be back and firing. You add a guy like Sean Murphy, and all of a sudden you got a surplus at catcher between him and Travis d'Arnaud. One of them is going to DH. Maybe you move. What's his name? Now I'm blanking. I got to look up depth charts every few minutes because names don't come to my head. But their rotation as it stands is elite, right? Max Fried's great. Spencer Strider, second-year player's great. Kyle Wright's great. Charlie Morton's one of the more underrated pitchers. I know I said that about Sonny Gray. One of the more underrated pitchers in the league. But the guy I was thinking of was Marcell Ozuna. Maybe they moved Marcell Ozuna out of the DH spot. But when you have guys like Eddie Rosario, Michael Harris, Matt Olson, that I just forget about off the top of my head because I'm listing guys that first come to mind, you could see how deep that team is. And so I think they really make a good run at this. I think they have an improved bullpen. Guys like Colin McHugh, I think, can continue to improve. Raciel Iglesias is nasty. And so I have them as the first seed. And maybe that's also an indication that the NL is not as deep. Next up, the second seed, I have the San Diego Padres, of course, winning the NL West. And this is going to be a dogfight between them and the Dodgers. I think these are 2 really good teams. When you look at the Padres and you look at their top 4, when you look at the fact that you're going to have some combination of Fernando Tatis Jr., who I think is a top 5 player in baseball, in my opinion, Manny Machado, who's really underpaid until he got this extension. And despite him making a $300 million contract, he's underpaid for what he does for that team. Adding a guy like Xander Bogaerts in the offseason. They were in on Aaron Judge. If they got Aaron Judge, that'd have been incredible in terms of a lineup purpose. But adding a guy like Xander Bogaerts, and then you forget about Juan Soto. Juan Soto, one of the best hitters in baseball, one of the best hitters in baseball history, if he can continue the track from those first few years. On-base machine, a guy who's got underrated power. They have so many pieces that I love, and a really good rotation anchored by Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, and back end has a lot of interesting alternatives. Nick Martinez, who I talked about in the World Baseball Classic, guys like who's the guy they just signed for the Mets? Once again, I am blanking. Seth Lugo. I didn't have to look that one up. If you're watching on YouTube, I didn't click that fast. Seth Lugo, who I think could make an impact as a starter. I think the Padres are easily the second best team in the National League. The Dodgers will be on their tails, but I think they secure that second seed. Third seed, have to have a central winner just like we had in the AL. And I'm taking the Cardinals again to go back. I think that lineup is good. The rotation is improved. Full season of Jordan Montgomery is going to help. He's not an elite starting pitcher, but he's definitely good. Dylan Carlson, I think, is going to continue to grow as a player, not just because I love his first name because it's the same as my own, but I think Tyler O'Neill's going to play decently well for them despite dealing with some injuries last year. I like their lineup through and through. Their bullpen, I don't love, but nonetheless, I think they'll be a very good team, and I think they secured a 3 seed. In the 4 spot, I'm going to have, and I debated about this long and hard, and I still have a slash line on my paper between the 4th and 5th seed. And I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go the LA Dodgers at the 4th seed. I know they're going to, I mentioned they're going to vie for that position with the Padres in, the 2nd seed, and that's going to make a huge difference because the 2nd seed gets a bye. At the end of the day, the Dodgers are a machine, very similar to the Astros. And even though I don't have them winning their division, still going to be a very good team. Their starting rotation is going to be very, very good. And losing Walker Buehler hurts. It definitely does. But guys like Julio Urias, Clayton Kershaw is still elite. A full season of Dustin May back and healthy, I think, are really going to anchor them. And of course, that lineup is still nasty, even though guys like Cody Bellinger, who hasn't contributed in quite a few years, but have gone to Chicago, and guys like Gavin Lux have gotten hurt. You still have a lot of depth there, a lot of guys that can really make an impact. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, top of that lineup is still elite, right? JD Martinez being added in the offseason, I think, is a criminally underrated pickup for them, right? Upgrading, even though I like Justin Turner a lot, but it's a significant upgrade to go from Justin Turner to JD Martinez. And so I think that lengthens their lineup quite a bit, and I think they'll be a contender, obviously, for the championship. So I'll put them at the 4th seed. The 5th seed, I have the New York Mets. They spent a lot of money in the offseason, and I think that's the reason I have them here. I don't see them as the 5th best team in the National League right now. I think, or maybe I guess the Cardinals are worse than them, so maybe I see them as the 5th. I don't see them as better than who I have in the 6th spot. But at the end of the day, Steve Cohen's going to spend money, and if halfway through the season we get to a point where they need to add a high-priced a high-priced addition rather, at the DH spot especially, I don't think Daniel Vogelbach is their answer at DH long term. If they need a closer, if David Robertson's not cutting it in replace of Edwin Diaz, whose injury I mentioned in the World Baseball Classic conversation, I think they could definitely make an impactful add in the middle of the season to help stymie them and carry them into the postseason. At the end of the day, the health of their team is going to matter, right? Starling Marte getting hurt last year really impacted them. Their 2 best pitchers are 2 older guys, Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. And then you got a rotation behind them who's struggled with injuries. Quintana's hurt right now. The guy that they're bringing over from Japan, whose name is also escaping me. He's obviously going to potentially have some injuries, as players do when they come over from Japan, because they're pitching a lot more. They're pitching on shorter rests, and they're facing more stiff competition. They're trying to increase their velocity, which sometimes has an impact on the elbow muscles. Kodai Senga is the guy I was talking about. And Carlos Carrasco's up there as well. I like David Peterson as a guy who could slot in behind that rotation and fill in for Quintana while he's hurt. But nonetheless, them staying healthy is what's going to have to keep them up and making solid acquisitions at the trade deadline. And then in the 6th spot, I have the Philadelphia Phillies. So I have all 6 playoff teams from the NL staying solid in their spots. I like the addition of Trey Turner. I think it was a much needed move. When the Phillies were looking at a shortstop in the offseason, I thought they could have gone one of 2 ways, right? Their whole team is consistent of having bats that you'll find where you're going to put them on defense, right? Whether it's Nick Castellanos playing right, whether it's Kyle Schwarber playing left, whether it's guys throughout the infield. Didi Gregorius was there recently. He's obviously gone now, but who's not a great defender. They added bats and culture pieces in hopes that they'd find positions for them on the field. Rhys Hoskins isn't a great defender. Obviously, he's hurt now, but that's not my point. Guys all around that were impact defenders, and they changed that when they added Brandon Marsh in center field, in my opinion. And so they had a hole at shortstop, is my point. And they had several options out there. I thought one option could be to add a high defense, high base running guy that's also a good bat, and Trey Turner, right? Spending a little more, or adding a guy whose defense wasn't as a priority, even though I think he's a decent defender, but had a real impact bat. And that guy would be a guy like Xander Bogaerts, who ended up going to the Padres, right? But alternative realities that they could have gone. And I think they went for the smarter baseball decision in adding a guy like Trey Turner. He's going to be your leadoff hitter. So you have Kyle Schwarber, who can slot down a little bit in the lineup that significantly lengthens your lineup, right? So when Bryce Harper comes back, he's probably batting third, and JT Realmuto is probably batting fourth. And, Castellanos maybe is batting fifth. I don't know. Maybe it's, Hoskins is gone now. So I don't know where, everyone slots him, but it definitely lengthens your lineup quite a bit. But you add that speed, you add that defense, you add a guy who's been there and done that in the playoffs. I think it's a great addition for them. But at the end of the day, all these teams in the NL are very talented in the wild card race. I said the NL wasn't deep. I think the bottom end isn't that deep, but I think this top end is very stout. And so even though the Phillies made a significant addition, they weren't a great regular season team last year. So I think they still get in the playoffs pretty easily. I don't think the teams that are missing out can really keep up. I don't trust the Brewers or anyone else in the Central for that matter. The West, I mean, the Diamondbacks could make a run for it. I don't think the Giants have it in them, and the Rockies aren't going to be a great team. And then in the East, the Marlins are not capable of making the playoffs. And obviously the Nationals are one of the worst teams in baseball. So I think the Phillies are going to get that playoff spot pretty easily. And I think they're going to be well deserving of it. So now breaking down what I have a prediction from the bracket. So in the AL start there, I have Cleveland versus Minnesota. I think Cleveland takes that series in 4. I think they're the better team. And that's just what it's going to come down to, right? Better pitching, better offense. And so they'll move on to face the Yankees. I think the Yankees end up advancing to the ALCS, winning in 6 games. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm getting these series mixed up. So the wild card round is only 3 games, not 5. So I think it'll be, I'll say it's a 3-game series between Cleveland and Minnesota. Cleveland advances to play the Yankees. I think it'll be tough. Yeah, I'll say the Yankees in 5, which is what it was last year against Cleveland. I think Cleveland puts up a fight, but the Yankees end up getting it done. On the other side, we have Seattle and Toronto rematch from last year. I think Seattle takes that. I think Seattle takes that in 2, to be honest. I think their pitching is going to matter most when it comes to the postseason. And they'll advance to their division rivals, the Houston Astros. I think Houston's just in a class of their own in that division and in that side of the bracket. So I'll say Houston wins that in 3, a sweep. You have Houston versus the Yankees, and I usually pick the Yankees to win everything. But I feel a bit disingenuous doing that when I don't see a world where Houston gets much worse. And I like the Yankees' chances. I think they could be significantly better than they were last year, but I still think the Astros advance. I'm going to take the Astros in 7 against the Yankees. And then, of course, the Astros making the World Series. On the NL side, Phillies and Cardinals 3-6 matchup. I have the Phillies advancing just like they did last year. I'll say it's in 3. I'll say the Cardinals put up a fight like they did last year, but I think the Phillies make it through. The 4-5, the Dodgers and the Mets. I think home field advantage is going to play big into this one. I think the Mets fans are going to be very excited for this matchup, but the Dodgers will have home field advantage and they'll win that in 3. They'll move on. The Dodgers will to face the Braves. I think the Braves going to win that pretty easily. I'd probably say it happens in 4 games. Braves, I think their lineup is just deeper. Their pitching is comparable, and I think their bullpen's better. And then on the other side, you have the Padres and the Phillies. I think the Padres get revenge on the NLCS from last year. I think they move on. I think it's going to be a tough series. I think they win it in 5 and they move on. But nonetheless, I just can't bet against the top of that lineup and elite playoff performers like Joe Musgrove at the end of the day. And so then we have the Padres and the Braves, and I'll say it's the Padres' year. I think Juan Soto could be an NL MVP candidate. I think he's obviously going to be a candidate. I think he is going to be the leader for that spot when the playoffs come around, and I think he'll carry them in all reality past the Braves into the World Series versus the Astros. And I'll take the Padres. I'll take the Padres to win it all. I think this will be the year of Juan Soto, the year of Fernando Tatis. People have forgotten how good Fernando Tatis Jr. is, right? He's made a few dumb mistakes, but I think he's a top 5 player in baseball. Elite speed, great bat to ball skills, elite power. He's going to be put in right field where he's not too comfortable, but I think he's going to be a very good defender for them. And then Juan Soto on the other side of the outfield is just an incredible matchup. I think the depth in that team is really, really going to play a big role, whether it's guys like Ha-Seong Kim, I think are going to make an impact. And so I have the Padres winning. I'll say it goes 7 just for the fun of it, but I'll take the Padres over the Astros in the World Series. So those are my predictions. Let me know what you think. If you're on YouTube, let me know your predictions in the comments. I'm not going to make individual predictions for MVP or Cy Young or Rookie of the Year or anything like that, just because I'm not too familiar with all the candidates. If I had to, I'll throw it out there just because it's the fun of it. I'm not looking at a list. I'm just guessing. AL Rookie of the Year, I'm going to say Gunnar Henderson. That's, I think, an easy choice for the Baltimore Orioles. I'm not going to do a Manager of the Year just because I'm entirely too lazy to remember guys' names. You know what? No, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the Twins have a resurgence. So I think, what's his name? And I can't even remember his name. I know he's got a cool name. Rocky something. Why am I blanking on his name? Rocco, not Rocky. Rocco Baldelli. I think he's going to win it for the Twins for having a resurgent second half. So he's going to win Manager of the Year. Gunnar Henderson for the Orioles, their rookie prospect coming up. I think he's going to win Rookie of the Year. Cy Young, I think it'll be Ohtani. I think he's going to have a really good pitching season this year. And MVP, I don't want to pick Ohtani again. I'm not going to pick Judge. I'm going to look up AL MVP candidates while I stall. In the NL, I'm going to go Spencer Strider for Cy Young, right, from the Braves. I think he's going to have a great season. So I think he'll win the Cy Young. Rookie of the Year, I'm gonna go with was it Jordan Walker? Is that his name from the from the Cardinals? Their prospect they called up, their outfielder, third baseman. Okay, I'm looking at the MVP odds. So you have Ohtani for AL, Ohtani plus 190, Trout plus 450, Judge plus 500, Julio Rodriguez plus 700, Yordan Alvarez plus 11. I'll go Yordan Alvarez. I think he's going to have a very good season with the bat, and those are some good odds plus 1100. I think he's going to be playing a lot of outfield, which will help his WAR numbers and his overall value numbers, advanced stats and such. So I'll pick Yordan Alvarez for AL MVP. Back to the NL. So I got the Jordan Walker Rookie of the Year. I got Spencer Strider, Cy Young, Manager of the Year. I'll go Bob Melvin because I think the Padres, like I mentioned, are going to have a good season. And in the same vein, I'll go Juan Soto and MVP because, like I mentioned, year of Soto. I think they win the World Series. Padres over Astros in 7. So those are my predictions. Let me know, like I said, let me know in the comments. Give me your award predictions too. I made them on this platform. So you're going to be able to make fun of me. I want to be able to make fun of it. No, I'm just kidding. It's fun to encourage discussion. So please leave your opinion in the comments, what you think of my choices, or if you have choices of your own. I really appreciate that. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the podcast. A lot of baseball conversation, a longer episode. I don't know how long I've been going, but I've been going longer than I usually do. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you're on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe down below, click the bell. You get notified whenever a new video comes out. If you're on any audio platform, rate us 5 stars, tell your friends. Head over to all the socials. Links are in the description or in the show notes, or you can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddyscites.com. Access the podcast, the newsletter, the merchandise, all the socials, all the stuff, all the content. I really appreciate all the support, and I hope you really enjoyed this one because it was a lot of fun to talk about baseball. Baseball is back, man. I want to do an episode on expansion in baseball. So let me know. Drop a like if you'd enjoy that kind of content because I had an expansion episode on basketball. That's one of my more successful episodes on YouTube. Maybe I'll do that next week with potential expansion all over the place, whether it's Vegas, Montreal, Charlotte, Nashville, Vancouver, Portland. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that next week. But nonetheless, thank you for listening to this episode or watching this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day.